to explore the topic of how we develop a stronger and sustainable investment landscape. So just to repeat again, we have Sky Kurtz here, founder and CEO of Pure Harvest Smart Farms, and Noha Shaker, founder of FinTech Egypt. Sky and Noah, could you please explain and go into a bit about your backgrounds and how you're relevant to the sustainable investment landscape here in this region?
Yeah, certainly. So thank you for having us. I'm Sky Kurtz, the co-founder and CEO of Pure Harvest Smart Farms. I originally am from the United States, and I worked in technology investments at a firm called Francisco Partners. We're an affiliate of Sequoia Capital, managed around 30 billion of technology capital investing globally. But while I was at Stanford, I also worked on a collaboration with the Skolkovo Institute in Russia, helping to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem mimicking the one of Silicon Valley, where research from SRI and efforts from the university were later monetized into what now has become the greatest technology hub in the world. So I worked on that, but of course I also run a very large technology-enabled agribusiness based here, headquartered out of the United Arab Emirates, but operating now in Saudi and expanding into Kuwait, where we design, build, and operate these very high-tech climate-controlled greenhouses that let us localize food production anywhere. We've raised over $280 million of capital, building both in the region and now expanding into Asia. So I sit on both sides. I've sat on architecting ecosystems, and I live within the ecosystem, raising capital and building companies.
Amazing. Noah?
Well, I wear multiple hats to facilitate and make it easier for you to relate them together. I always like to start with my life mission, what I'm working towards, and that's a more fair, inclusive financial industry. So when people say to democratize finance, it's not just a slogan. It takes a lot of work, a lot of forces on the ground that need to collaborate and be mobilized. So 3 years ago, I quit corporate, where I headed digital banking and a venture capital fund that invests only for profit in fintech startups. 3 years prior to that, I established the Egyptian Fintech Association, a non-for-profit that works on building that fintech ecosystem to support creating that environment that is nurturing to fintech startups, all the regulatory reforms, policy advocacy, and the like. And I co-founded an African Union for Fintech Associations. We started with 5 countries on board. Now we have presence in 34 African markets, and the number is growing. I could not stay away from investment, but now I'm an impact investment. I'm a Go-Be partner, an investment company that operates mainly out of multiple Far Eastern markets. But we are bringing Go-Be partners to the Middle East and Africa for the first impact fund that I'm putting together, and I'm going to be running and building. I run a boutique consulting firm that works on the innovation of the incumbents within the financial industry, so we can have the established banks, insurance companies, investment banks on board as well, supporting fintechs through partnerships, investments, and the like. So everything that is there contributes to building that supportive, nurturing environment, fintech. Thank you. That was long. Yeah.
Thank you. So Sky and Noah, you have both been significant contributors in building various ecosystems and as operator founders and individual investors in this region. What do you believe are some of the elements that are conducive to entrepreneurship in this region?
Yes, please.
Several things, right? I think fundamentally to build companies, and especially ones that are venture-backed to rapidly scale, capital's a fundamental element of that, right? That there can be great ideas, great market opportunities, great management teams, and great business models, but you need the capital to fund and execute against that opportunity. But to have and attract and maintain capital, you need solid financial markets and institutions, right? And you need clear rule of law, these fundamental elements of a solid business environment, and making it relevant to the region. I think the region is certainly showing that. The economy has opened. Governments have demonstrated they're open for business, very generally free markets, though there are protected sectors, as there are in many economies, like oil and gas, or in this kind of economy, or like defense in America. But ultimately an open market. I think also you fundamentally need entrepreneurs. You need aspiring leaders who have great ideas, who want to build something. And historically, this region imported talent heavily, and it imported many things, right? It had oil wealth, it exported its capital, and imported what it needed. But over many years, they've been building the research institutions, the capabilities, and now some very successful companies that have ascended in the region. And I'll use an example as Kareem. But that created a ton of highly trained entrepreneurs that are now spilling into the ecosystem, and what I call sending the elevator back down. And now they're entering and founding new companies. I heard a statistic that over 50% of the millionaires created by Kareem have all now started companies, which is exactly what you want to see. That's how Silicon Valley was built, right? Fundamentally, early people built companies, then created the venture capital industry and invested in the businesses. So I think you have a lot of the elements you need here. Good and understandable markets, stability, good and visionary leadership. You're attracting talent and developing talent in the region, and then there's capital that's now forming and supporting these ventures.
Success begets success.
Absolutely.
And if I may add to that, we have seen a lot of movement amongst regulators. They are no longer hopping late on the innovation train. Now they are taking the lead to actually put together regulations that are supportive and help innovation rather than limit innovation. So you see regulatory sandboxes around, you see fintech regulations around, perhaps even, operating in the Egyptian market and being in part largely Egyptian, I always like to focus on the Egyptian market whenever we are actually discussing regulatory reforms, because until a few years ago, we, as even bankers, used to send letters to the central bank and regulators and get the response in letters. Now, you have open discussions all the time. We have a regulatory sandbox in place. They reached out and we worked together as an industry representative to put together the fintech strategy for the country, and later on the fintech regulation, whether it's for banking financial services with the central bank or the non-banking financial services with the Financial Regulatory Authority. So regulatory reforms are actually a key driver, because you, as a startup, you can operate in the gray area for as many number of months and years, but if you really want to grow, scale, and continue to deliver value, you have got to be regulated. So that's one of the key drivers in there. The second biggest one is the actual market. I'm a positive person, so I always tend to look at the part that is failed in the cup. So we've always complained as a region of how underserved we are, not just when it comes to financial services, unfortunately, but the services in general. And actually my keynote speech the other day was about how to approach financial inclusion from a different perspective, and I elaborated a lot on embedded finance, and now I'm going to elaborate on blended capital, because that's a key driver in there when you are building capacities. So having that size of market of hundreds of millions of people who are underserved, whether key services like education, like healthcare, even the commerce, digital commerce, and of course, as far as the financial services is concerned, and having that many number of MSMEs that are actually in millions. So, and if you look at the Saudi market, you have more than like 700K SMEs who have funding gaps in there. They are not really properly served by the financial industry. That represents opportunity. So being underserved is an opportunity for investors, opportunity for startups who actually have what it takes to build startups and serve the market. So that big unserved market is the second biggest driving force beyond that goes behind pushing innovation ahead and the entrepreneurship ecosystems. Perhaps we can later cover the blended finance element.
Absolutely.
Please. Yeah.
And how have each of you used technology to invest, build, and scale?
Well, so the company most relevant for this region is Pure Harvest Smart Farms, because I've built other companies before out of the United States and other markets. But at Pure Harvest, we use technology to fundamentally control weather, right? We design, build, and operate these very high-tech, climate-controlled greenhouse solutions that let us localize production in extreme markets, as I mentioned. But fundamentally here, when you look at the elements of food production anywhere in the world, it's sunlight, labor, land, energy, water, taxation, transportation, and capital. And fundamentally, plants grow on sun, CO2, water, and nutrients. Sun and CO2 are abundant in this region. So I believed, and part of the theory of the company was that if you could harness the power of that sun, including embedding solar energy, you could actually be the lowest cost and highest quality fresh produce maker in the world. And I actually have produce over there, which you saw earlier, Bina, that is epic. I encourage some people to try it. But we turned out to be right on that theory. We use technology, though. We have a centralized software that controls a bunch of hardware so we can orchestrate climate internally. Once you do that, you just let God do his work, and the plants grow incredible output. We're the highest yielding tomato farm in the world, significantly, out of the United Arab Emirates, and now we've built in Saudi Arabia. We have a farm coming online that will hit the markets in March with almost 140 tons a week of production of 16 varieties of beautiful tomatoes, and in partnership with Nadek, the large dairy company that many of the Saudis here would know. And so we are already here. That farm is embedded with a 30 megawatt solar power farm, so it's over 80% powered by solar power. So it's very sustainable. We're carbon negative. We not only consume carbon and feed it to the plants, we displace the airplane or truck that might have brought fresh produce as an alternative. So really around everything we do, we've leveraged technology to build this company and make it possible here, but capitalizing on comparative advantages that this region and this country have, which fundamentally we have a lot of sunlight, a lot of CO2, and as you mentioned, a large market opportunity of underserved consumers that literally have never tasted what a real tomato tastes like produced here, because it hasn't been possible given the environmental conditions and the challenges here. So we overcome that challenge and make this one of the greatest places to farm in the world.
Thank you. Noah?
Well, that's one utilization of actually not just one technology, but multiple technologies that are there that makes it feasible to attend to one of the challenges that we are going to be facing sooner or later, and that's the limited access to food, which is key to sustaining life on Earth. What does technology as an enabler do? Technology is an enabler. We've been offering services for hundreds of years. Those services has expanded, but many of them are still the same as far as the service itself is concerned. So farming, we've done farming for millions and millions of years, but now farming is different because of technology. What do I mean when I say different? It's more cost efficient, so accordingly it makes the probability of you running a profitable business higher, and that's the sole contributor to sustaining a business and continuing to offer markets. So technology makes it a lot cheaper, a lot more cost efficient to either manufacture products or offer services. What else does technology do? Technology helps with the scale. So if you are farming 1 acre of land or 1 feddan of land, and you're doing it the old manual way, the produce that you get out of it is going to be less than 10% of what you would get if you've actually utilized the right technology.
Maybe less than 2%.
Thank you very much, even 2%. So technology made every industry more scalable. If we want to focus on the financial industry, it made it accessible. One of the key barriers, aside from the pricing, of course, that we have when we attempt to offer a financial service or enter a market for the first time is how accessible our service is. So if you rely on a brick-and-mortar model to offer financial services, you can only serve people within your area. Traveling in many parts of the world, especially in our region, is a challenge. If you are outside a main city where you have all the service providers mainly situated, your access to services is limited. So technology makes our services a lot more accessible. And technology drives innovation. Now, there are new industries that are here because of technology. There are new inventions that has made our life better. Telecommunications, for example, that's one industry that was never there. Technology made it feasible, and it became one of the key drivers to multiple, no, not to multiple industries, to every other industry it is, because telecommunications enables the internet, and everything is going to be built on the 6G networks, and we're excited about that development in there because it's going to facilitate and enable multiple services and even new industries.
Bina, if I can build on one comment she said, which I think is an important thing for people to cement, is technology is really a tool, it's an enabler, right? And when we talked about, this is about a sustainable ecosystem, that fundamentally technologies increase productivity, human productivity, machine productivity, et cetera, right? They fundamentally increase the output per unit of input. And that is absolutely needed in a world serving more and more people with less and less resource, right? So when you talked about the roles, I gave an example of how we use tech to build a company, but it's how the world is doing it. But what's important about building a sustainable ecosystem is really this concept of value creation versus value capture. There's a value chain from a mineral in the earth that eventually becomes an element of an automobile, right? And a huge value chain of industries stepped between that before the final output. And the final price of the car versus the price of the mineral in the earth are very different, right? That's how you quantify the value chain. But who captures the value in that value chain? That's about building a sustainable system. A government like Saudi or the UAE or this region is working to do this, but to put in place the institutions and the ecosystem that enable its citizens to participate both in the value creation and the capture of value. And that's a really fundamental thing, because let me give a sharp contrast. We'll use the farming example because it's intuitive to everyone. An example of an economy that does a lot of value creation and very little capture, the coffee industry. Huge amounts of people employed in it globally, hugely labor intensive. People give their lives to grow the coffee we all enjoy, which is now the #1 consumed beverage in the world after water, right? But then how much value do these people capture? How much do their economies grow in these coffee producing nations? It's very dismal, right? The value capture is Starbucks. They've captured it all globally, right? I mean, they're now the largest coffee buyer on the planet. Now, it's not to criticize it, it's to show the difference between the United States' participation in the coffee value chain and that of any one of these coffee-producing nations in Colombia or Ghana or anywhere, right? And it's a powerful example to cement. Technology's role in that is fundamental, but it's also the role of creating an ecosystem that your citizens participate in both the value creation and the capture of that value to create wealth, grow your economies, and improve the livelihoods of your people.
If I may add one thing about technology that is really important and is a key driver for change, and that's enabling collaborations. If we look at prior to the technology age, every service provider had to cover the value chain end to end. So you had to carry out every process there is from the beginning till the end. From the moment you onboard customer or acquire customer, you go through the entire process until the moment the service is delivered. That required a lot of capacity building, a lot of resources, the absence of the ability to concentrate to build solid knowledge and expertise in only one area. And the focus on building that solid know-how is one of the key drivers of growth later on. So everything was centralized. Everybody had to do everything from A to Z. So if we can give an example with a food producer, not even a bank, you had to do the farming and then the harvesting and then the distribution, and sometimes even the sale to the end consumer. you had to cover the process end to end because there weren't means to build those collaborative networks and bring together other players who have built certain infrastructure, certain set of expertise that drives the cost of operating lower. An example on the banking system. You don't have to acquire the customer yourself and serve them physically because that is expensive. Now you have digital platforms who could actually help you onboard the customers. You do not have to own and operate those digital platforms yourself. You rely on partners, but again, that partnership and collaboration is built upon technology that enables that connectiveness. So my partner as a bank can be a B2B e-commerce platform that sells services to a certain target market segment. That platform is going to use my infrastructure as a bank and me offering banking as a service on the back end to offer loans to their customers. So the distribution as well is going to be done by the e-commerce platform, while I, as a financial institution, I'm going to be focused on my focused area of expertise, which is carrying the loan books and doing the processing and the reporting and the regulatory seeing and everything that is required by the central banks and the like. So technology enabled collaborative models, and this is going to offer opportunities again to startups, to multiple digital businesses that are there, and it's going to help everybody create value and capture part of the value.
Great, thank you. Now to bring the focus back to investments, it's clear that to change the ecosystem, we need to bring in not just investments from within the region, but also externally. How would you say the investment landscape has changed from now and even just pre-pandemic 2 years ago? For example, do you think the red tape has been cut and access to competitive capital has become easier? Or do you think investors from outside still need to be trained and understand the market?
Bina, I think it's both. I mean, I think you're familiar with our journey in Pure Harvest Smart Farms, but early on it was difficult, right? We were asset-intensive agriculture technology, onshore, IoT, in a time when this region had very few financial institutions, venture capital firms, super angels, anything, investing in early stage companies at all, not even technology companies. But then on top of that, almost no hardware, deep tech, anything. It was mainly internet startups and e-commerce, right? So it was a very nascent. But the speed of that transformation has been epic. I mean, over the last 5 years, the number of venture funds that have formed, the governments getting involved and putting their money where their mouth is in their interest to economically diversify, initiatives here, and there are large institutions in the Saudi Industrial Development Fund, Ag Development Fund, numerous venture capital funds like Saudi Telecom Ventures and others. In the United Arab Emirates, places like Abu Dhabi Investment Office, ADQ Ventures, all of these didn't exist just 5 years ago, right? I mean, one in Saudi did. But it's a rapid transformation and attraction, and really, as you said earlier, success begets success. As I think what we really need to bring this ecosystem to the next level is we need breakout successes. We need to show the international capital markets that companies here can build interesting things that the world needs, both serving our regional economic needs, but also exporting technologies. Historically, we imported technologies and capabilities. We have very few international brands out of the region. One shining example is Emirates Airlines, right? But I bet if we all fight, we can name 5 or 10 on our hand at best. Internationally renowned companies out of the region. But that's changing rapidly, right? The giant successes like I mentioned Kareem earlier because it's the largest and best known one, but there's others. Angami's about to go public very soon. There was a de-SPAC in Saudi Arabia recently. There really is an awakening of capital markets that companies from here can solve real problems and be successful. But that brings me to one other insight that I want to share for the entrepreneurs out there. There are 3 ways to build or to acquire technology. There's to build it, to buy it, and to borrow it, or call it steal it, right? And there are entire economies built around this. And I won't pick on China, but it's a classic example. But really the hardest and longest one is to build. To buy or partner, and then to steal or borrow great ideas are the fastest. We need all of them. What I don't want, and I fear a bit, there's this idea that every single thing needs to be novel and rebuilt here. That is not how you build a rapidly scaling company. It's not capital efficient. It scares away the markets. There's enough for them to get comfortable, the foreign investors and new venture capital investors. There's enough for them to get comfortable about the market, the management, the model, and the money being available to develop successful ventures, to not also have them taking giant technological leaps. So I want to encourage entrepreneurs out there to think hard about what you choose to buy versus build versus borrow. And I want to use us at Pure Harvest Smart Farms for an example. In my first build, I was trying to be capital efficient in an already capital intensive industry. So I looked at the entire world for where could I integrate a cooling system, a screens, a glass, a this, a that. And I avoid building what I don't need to. Only what doesn't exist to meet my specific problem and my need, my USP, did I go build, right? And then over time, I increase my research and development budget. I increase the novel things I'm doing as I've de-risked the business and proven product market fit, right? And I think that's an important insight here. I've been talking to a lot of entrepreneurs at this conference, and this idea that we need to build a novel everything isn't true, and it will slow us down. I think instead, look to the world where you can buy or partner or borrow great ideas and go, create that success and that traction, and it will make it easier to attract capital and grow your business.
Thank you. Noah, your insight?
It's one thing that would help any entrepreneur building a new business to raise capital, and that is to have a proper problem statement to which you design a proper solution. Find a pressing need in the market you are planning to serve. Study your customers carefully, very well, and then design a solution that perfectly caters to the needs of that particular market segment. That being effective in solving a problem or in offering an opportunity is the number one main guarantee that later on you are not going to find it challenging, neither to onboard partners nor to find funding. The second thing is to do that efficiently, deploying and using the right technology in there. The third is to find the fit in the market. So selecting the right market, selecting the right go-to-market strategy through partnerships on the ground and the like is going to facilitate your growth as a startup. But the key to success is solely having a solution to a pressing problem or making an opportunity clear to users so they would want to use you to actually get value out of that opportunity you presented, or to use you as a solution to that pressing problem or as a fulfiller to that pressing need. That's one guarantee.
Bina, one comment building on what she said, and this is back to the theme of a sustainable investment environment. Each entrepreneur, you're an agent in this ecosystem, and if you just kind of throw a noodle on the wall and hope it sticks, raise some capital and try to build against that in the classic other people's money, take risks, it's not good, because one of the things that will destroy a sustainable ecosystem is lots of capital gets raised and deployed and then lost. Those losses can set ecosystems back 10, 20 years. I'll give an example. The first clean tech boom isn't recent, right? It was almost 20 years ago. But there were a lot of promises made by particularly then solar, some coal gasification and wind power companies, giant product claims about their cost curves and their future technology and their development, and the hype cycle took form, and piles and billions of capital poured into the sector, most of which was lost in an absolutely devastating blow, setting back the sector for a very long time. That was a very bad thing, because obviously clean tech was needed. And now we're in clean tech 2.0, and it's been booming, and the technologies are real, and the cost curves of solar are real. So they weren't wrong, they were just 10 or 20 years ahead and or lying, right? They were not actually being honest about the value proposition, where they were in their technology development, and they mispositioned their story and lost a lot of capital. So I think it's a really important thing to say. There's a responsibility to all the entrepreneurs to make a sustainable ecosystem is to build a real business you'd invest in. And I, as an investor, and you know this, Bina, I won't invest in a company at all if the founders haven't put money in or their families haven't. Now, proportionate to their wealth. I don't expect everyone has money, but if they're super wealthy, I better see some money in. And if they're poor, I just want to see a little in to show that you eat your own cooking. You're not just taking
skin in the game.
Exactly. You're not just throwing noodles on the wall.
And that takes us to the blended finance concept. Thank you very much for saying that. I fully agree. But there is an element in early stage technology that is mainly research and development. So it's not just there all of a sudden. There's a lot of work to be done to actually create and then perfect and then commercialize that technology, and that takes time and effort. So one thing that sometimes entrepreneurs, especially in the scientific field, do not keep in mind is the lead time to actually having an idea that may work and then developing that technology and then commercializing it. They seek for-profit capital really early on. What is blended capital? Blended capital is a mix of 2 or 3 types of those. You have philanthropic capital that's mainly given to you as a grant. So the majority of the R&D and researches that we see happening are usually driven by that philanthropic capital. You see organizations that take on a mission and put money behind that mission to find cures to diseases, to develop and perfect technologies that later on can be used by entrepreneurs to enable businesses. There is, and of course, philanthropic capital, it's money that you get and they don't expect it back, although they expect a result. So they expect you, when you take that money, to come out with a project that is very well carried out, a solution to a problem, an invention, or the like. So you still deliver, except you do not deliver money. You deliver on the commitment you made to them when you approach them to take some of that capital. The other type of capital in there is development capital, which is a mix of like the philanthropic, like you take it, we don't expect it, just deliver, and the for-profit, you take it and you give us return back. We want to see profit coming out of it. The development capital is what we call patient capital. So they give you money, they expect you to deliver profits. They just are easy on you when it comes to the timelines of that, and sometimes it's discounted as well, so they do not expect you to offer them a return similar to that of the commercial capital that is there. And of course, the for-profit capital is when you do things straightly for profit, no impact, nothing else. It's just making money. How can we blend those together to make sure that we close gaps on the ground that we suffer from as a region? Although you see billions being directed into Middle East and Africa to support startups, we still have the struggle in the really early stage investments in the pre-seed and seed. Although we have multiple angel investment networks and we have really early stage startups, governments building accelerators, there is still a challenge and a gap. Just imagine that you blend, you put together some of the capital where we do not expect return, so the entrepreneurs can actually use that money to do the research, do the market research, build the solutions and the businesses. And then comes the for-profit capital after the startup has already put together a minimum viable product. They've already gone to market, done some testing and achieved some traction on the ground. So it's like everybody's happy. The ones who do philanthropy or development, they're happy because the startup is out, they see social impact being carried out. The for-profit people are happy because they're not going to be risking money or giving money to startups that do not exactly fit the risk appetite. There's no concern in there. They're going to be putting money in a proven idea at least, and so everybody's happy. So blended capital or blended finance is one of the driving forces in emerging markets, as we say. So if I am to leave the audience with a comment or something to do in there, I would ask every organization, corporation, to have an investment arm in there, early stage, to offer support to the startups, partner with them. I would encourage every high net worth individual, every family office to have some philanthropic capital that is directed towards R&D. And I would definitely encourage the VCs and the for-profit money to seek the partnerships and work together with everybody to create value for everyone and drive that pipeline of startups on the ground that we currently miss. We can mobilize money into Middle East and Africa, but unless we have that reliable pipeline of investable startups, we are not going to get anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. Now with just 2 minutes remaining, I would like to have the panelists leave our audience with some actionable advice. So in just 2 to 3 sentences, Sky and Noah, could you please, for those of us who are not serial entrepreneurs and we're not just shooting darts in the dark, give new entrepreneurs advice. Where can they access capital in this region?
Well, let me give one piece of advice to policymakers, one to investors and one to entrepreneurs. To policymakers, bringing down the barriers and the knowledge barriers to entry in a market is critical. It's happening, organizations are forming, but it's very critical that it shouldn't be labor intensive, money intensive, et cetera, to sort out how to operate in the regulatory environment, form the company, et cetera. So these customer service agents, like what Saudi had in the Saudi Arabian General Investment Authority, the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, these are very important to lower that barrier, because that time and that money is precious, and it's not a useful, productive use of capital. So regulators, that's critical to bring those barriers down. To investors, I believe you got to commit to the market to get comfortable and understand the opportunity here, the cultural diversity, the language diversity, the micro barriers. It seems very scary and complex from the outside, but once you're inside, it's a vibrant, investable opportunity. High population growth rates, growing wealth, adoption of technology, supportive and visionary governments. There's a good environment to commit some resource, to get on the ground, get comfortable in the region, and support this ecosystem, and you'll make money and be rewarded for it. And then to the entrepreneurs, it's what I said earlier. When you're going to go build a company, commit, right? Understand. You mentioned, are you a solution in search of a problem, or are you solving a real problem? Do that work. There's a lot of knowledge out there. You're not alone, but you really need to commit. And then I would say invest your own capital. Nothing speaks louder to investors that if you put your own money and your friends and the other co-founders and actually started something, that traction, people see that commitment and they want to support it, and it will increase your chance of investment success.
Thank you, Sky. And Noah, if you could just, out of time, but just one sentence.
Okay, one sentence that would be build the right vehicles, put the vehicles in place that can help you mobilize capital from outside the region to inside the region. There are many things that need to be done, but this is one critical path that takes a long time to have the right vehicles in place that can help you deploy that capital once you actually attract it. You've already covered the part of attracting the capital.
Excellent. Thank you both. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists, Sky Kurtz and Noah Shaker.